Welcome back, handymen and women. It's time for another episode of How Much Should I Charge? So I'm going to start this out by saying when I was getting started, I went and looked around for a lot of information about what to charge because I didn't know what to charge. And what I found over and over and over, no matter where I went, was the answer always seemed to be the same, which was, it depends. It depends is true, but it's not really very helpful. So I'm going to give you all some actual numbers here. And you just need to keep in mind that you do have to adjust these numbers for multiple different reasons. One reason that they vary is your location, the demographics of your location, how much money people make, how much money people spend, how the housing market is doing. A lot of just where you're at has a lot to do with it. Also, smaller towns don't pay as much as big cities. Also, licensing. If you're licensed, you can charge more because there are people out there who will only hire licensed people for every single thing, even when it's not required to have a license. So you can charge more if you get one. Also, home value. If you're in a very expensive home, number one, the expectation for quality goes up, so your price is going to go up with that. And number two, just generally speaking, more expensive homes you can charge more for. Also, this video is about what I feel to be standard pricing. What you can charge, not how much you can get away with charging, but just simply what I feel like a good, normal, mid to high-end price for something would be. So yes, you can charge more on many of these circumstances, but this is not what I'm telling you to do. I'm just telling you what I think a good, healthy, long-term business relationship would look like in terms of what you're charging. And finally, the numbers I'm going to give you here today, these are for labor only. Materials are always going to be a separate thing. They're always going to cost what they cost. This can also vary across the country, but it's also going to vary just based on the idea that you're replacing with like kind. Like kind is a word you're going to hear quite frequently, which is, let's say you have a white ceiling fan, a white 42-inch ceiling fan with a globe on the bottom. You're going to try to replace that with a white 42-inch ceiling fan with a globe on the bottom of a similar quality. So this is labor only, not materials. Today is all about sinks. So we'll start right off at the top. For the sink itself, for the whole thing, if somebody just wants a new basin, which is what you call the part of the sink that actually mounts to the countertop that the faucet and everything else mounts to. So if they want to replace the sink basin, for me, that's $250. That's the most expensive thing that we'll be doing. Whether that's a replacement or installing new, both ways that's going to be $250. Now, if you're installing new, you have to spend some time cutting a hole in the countertop, etc., etc. However, if you're replacing, then you have a whole lot of extra work getting the damn thing out. So I just do both of those at a flat $250 plus materials. Outside of that, faucet repair, number one, I'm going to say I don't recommend repairing faucets. I don't repair faucets. Anytime there's a faucet that needs a repair, as far as if it's dripping, now if there's something physical that like say it needs to be tightened up, or there's a set screw, the ones that have the handle that comes up and down left and right, those handles have a set screw on the back or on the front underneath, and those set screws just tighten the handle to it. But if in any way, shape, or form the faucet won't turn off and there's some kind of dripping, I always replace those. Now, the reason I always replace them is because almost every time the reason it's dripping is because the seal's worn out in there. If the seal's worn out, it's usually because there's a lot of hard water that's collected on the things that seal is rubbing against. So if you put a new seal in, then what you're going to find is that 6 months later, you're going to get called back again because that same buildup of calcite and whatnot, it's basically like sandpaper. So that same buildup is just going to ruin your new seal just like it ruined the last one. So I always put a new faucet in. Right now I'm charging $125 for new faucets. However, I'm probably bumping up to $150. I bumped a few up to $150 and I didn't get any pushback. So probably pretty soon that's going to be a $150 job. Otherwise, right now it's $120 like half the time. Caulk. A lot of times you need to caulk around the sink, and this will be something that you'll find if people are reporting that they'll usually say the sink is leaking or the faucet's leaking interchangeably, when what they mean might be the shutoff valve's leaking, the supply lines, the faucet itself, the strainer basket. So many different things can be leaking, but a lot of times when people are finding water underneath their sink, sometimes if you can't find a good reason for it, you need to look around the perimeter of the sink basin on top of the countertop. It should be caulked, generally siliconed, to the countertop. And if it's not, or if some of that caulking or silicone is gone, water that gets on the countertop is going to seep through that and go underneath. That's $125. Accessories. This would be your spray wand. This would also be like soap dispenser. Sometimes they have water filters installed with a little tap that comes out on top. $125. Strainer basket. That's the part that attaches the sink to the drain plumbing. When you get the new sink, it's got a big hole, and that's where you put the strainer basket, which necks down to a 1 1/4 or a 1 1/2 inch. Sinks should be 1 1/2 inch, but you never know. Necks down to a 1 1/2 inch drain line for you to connect all that to. Replacing that basket sometimes can be a pretty difficult job, so you're not always just going to charge the $125, but most of the time that's $125. And if you have some kind of trouble with it, that may go up to $150 or more. That's something to do at your discretion. Garbage disposal. So far in the past, I've always charged $125 for these. I've gotten the process for them down to, like, I think my record was 13 minutes. Sometimes it takes me 40 minutes. It depends on what's going on. But for garbage disposals, in the past, I've always charged $125. That's another one that lately I've been testing, bumping it up to $150. I've received no pushback, so I'm probably going to keep it at $150. Drains, just leaky drain lines in general, all over the place. That's always just $125. And part of the justification for that is I take the whole thing apart, I clean it, I put new seals and gaskets on it, and I put it all back together, so I know I'm not going to have to come back. And I'm going to give you all a little tip too, whether it's drain lines or anything else. If you work on a sink, when you're done, I want you, especially if it has a garbage disposal, but I want you to plug both basins, and I want you to fill both basins to the top, and then I want you to drain them together. And if you have a garbage disposal, when you drain them together, I want you to turn on the garbage disposal while they're draining, because this will actually pressurize down below, and it's going to let you know if you have any leaks. So the first thing you got to do, have one dry hand and feel everywhere. You want to make sure it's all dry underneath. You actually put your hands on all of the drain plumbing and make sure it's all dry before you get started. If it's not, dry it off really well. You don't want a single drop able to touch your hand, because what you're going to be looking for is a single drop. So when you're all done and everything's all dry, plug both sinks, fill them to the top, and then with one hand you pull the plugs and start the garbage disposal, and immediately with the other hand you go underneath and you feel all over everything. If you work on a sink and a week later the tenant reports a leak, they're going to decide that that must have been you. So don't have there be any leaks there when you leave. It only takes about 10 minutes to do, and you're going to think to yourself, oh, everything's fine, I can go, I'm in a hurry, I've got another job to go to. Just take the 10 minutes, because when you have to go drive that 25 minutes back to that property to fix a leak that wasn't your fault for free, so that your property managers don't think you're doing a bad job and making them pay for your mistakes, spend the 10 minutes and just do it. Supply lines. And here's a little tip I'm going to give you before I tell you the price. Here's a tip for supply lines. When you do supply lines, or rather when you do a new faucet, there's a faucet called the Glacier Bay Market faucet that has supply lines already attached. When you put in a new faucet, I always put these in, and I think you should too, unless they request something different or unless it is too different. Say there was a bronze gooseneck, you're not going to replace that with a Glacier Bay Market. But they come with supply lines, and you're going to find a lot of times when you disconnect and reconnect existing supply lines, they're going to end up having a bad gasket on them, and you're going to have to replace that gasket or the supply lines altogether. So I do recommend using that Glacier Bay Market faucet. It's kind of a mid-range in terms of price. But supply lines, just like anything else, $125. It's going to be within the trip fee, simply because it's a fast job to do. Shut-off valves. Now here's another tip. You're going to find this recurring through my videos. You do need to let your property managers know anytime you're going to be needing to shut off the water for the work you're doing. Let them know that if the shutoff valves are bad, if they won't shut off and you need them to shut off to do your job, that's going to be an additional $100. And you want to make sure that that's approved ahead of time, just that you've told them ahead of time and that they're okay to know that, hey, when I arrive, if the shutoff valve's bad, I'm going to have to replace it to do the job. If I have your approval for that in advance, it's going to be $100, and that's going to cover both of the shutoff valves, either one of them. But just so you know ahead of time, it'll be $100 for me to replace them if I have to replace them. If I don't have your approval in advance to do that, then I'm going to have to leave and wait for approval, and I'm going to have to charge my trip fee for the trip where I didn't have approval and couldn't do the work, or you can approve them and we won't have to have 2 different trip fees for one job. Snake. If you got to snake them, if the sink just won't drain and you end up needing to snake it to make it drain, or sometimes all you have to do is pull the P-trap off to get it to drain. For that, again, it's an even $125. $150 is something I've been thinking of going up to, simply because anytime something needs to be snaked, most plumbers minimum are charging $150 for that, so there's no reason for you not to. And finally, enamel repair. If it's like a white enamel sink, enamel is something I keep with me all the time. It's just 2 teeny tiny little bottles that you can mix together and stir, and you touch up the enamel on the sinks. That's $125, unless it's in a really nice expensive place where you may want to charge more, because you may need to spend a lot more time to get it nice and perfect. And then finally, there's a little upsell you can do here, and the upsell is 2 things. One, if you're replacing a sink basin, then go ahead and sell them on a new faucet. Just let them know, like, hey, this faucet may not come out and go back in well. If it has any issues, I'm going to have to come back and replace it later, but as long as we're taking the sink out and putting a new sink in, now's a good time to put that new faucet in. And me personally, I don't charge them extra labor for the new faucet, because you're already having to sort of disconnect everything anyways. So you might as well just put the new faucet on. The only difference is the cost of materials, and that's a good chance for them to upgrade. And then also take a look at that sink bottom underneath your faucet and your drain lines. A lot of these older homes, it's got mold, it doesn't smell good, it's just not in great shape. So I don't sell them on this to be done in the same job. What I do is, when I invoice, if that sink bottom had any issues, I send them pictures and I let them know that the sink bottom could use some work. Now for me, sink bottoms are a $250 job. The materials are $40, and over time I've gotten it down to about a 30-minute process. So that is some serious dollars per hour. And most other handymen, I'm telling you, your competition, they're putting 1/8" plywood down there, just 1/8" like paneling. It's not even plywood, it's just paneling. They're doing a horrible job of it, and they're probably charging something close to what you're charging. I put 1/2" birch. I have a whole process for it. It looks beautiful, and it's waterproof when I'm done. But upsell them on that new sink floor if there's a problem with the current sink floor. And that covers everything for sinks, guys. Actually, no, it doesn't, because I forgot bathroom sinks. One more thing to add. Most bathrooms have the pop-up where you pull that rod up and the plug goes in, and you push the rod down and the plug comes up. Those pop-ups I do for $125 again, and that's something else that you can also upsell on, because when you're at the place working on something else, you can notice little things like pop-ups missing from sinks, and just let your property manager know. But that's another $125 job, plus materials, of course. You guys go ahead and email me or comment if you have any questions about any of this, or if there's other jobs that are sink related that I left out. And then also, just to let y'all know, I use Jobber to run my business. There's going to be a link in the description where you can go and get a free trial of Jobber. I highly suggest you do. And here's what I would do. Get your free trial. Send your property managers 1 or 2 or 3 invoices and or estimates. Let them see how great the client hub is from their end. I'll bet you that they're going to really love it, and they're going to ask you about it, and they're going to hope that you go ahead and start using that, because it is the best business, the best software to run this business off of. Now also, as far as being on pricing, I have a price list right now. It's actually a jobs list that I've begun adding a lot of pricing to. It's kind of interactive. You can go in and you can fiddle with how much time it takes you to do the job, and you can sort of customize it to your purposes. Now this price list is not by any means complete. This is a work in progress that I made for myself. that I have been sending to people who subscribe to be a member to the channel, where they're paying a monthly fee to be a channel member. However, if you don't want to become a channel member, one of the things you can do is you can just shoot me an email, bulletproofhandymanbusiness@gmail.com, and for $25, I will send you, so send me the email and request it, and I will send you back at the email address you emailed me from, I will send you back the list and an invoice where you can just pay electronically through the invoice that actually goes through my jobber software as well. So if y'all are interested, I do want to be clear though, this is not a complete list. This is a work in progress. You can take it and you can start modifying it to your purposes and to your business, but that's $25. I do plan on finishing it, getting it to some sort of level that I can call complete. When I do, that completed version is going to be $50. But for now, for $25, if you want the incomplete, in progress version, it's going to list basically every single job that I can think of that my company does for these property managers, and it's going to have a lot of pricing included on there for that. So send me that email and I'll send you the list and an invoice for the $25. Otherwise, I hope y'all are killing it out there. I hope everything's going great, and I'll see y'all on the next one.